it's Drybear. The Battlefield 6 betas are over, and now it's just a waiting fest until October when we finally have the game in our hands. However, this morning we got a brand new update from the powers that be at Battlefield Studio talking about the changes they're making in response to the beta itself, which I think is super interesting because a lot of people loved the beta, many people had gripes with the beta or issues with the beta, and so the question is, what are they doing to respond to that kind of feedback, and will the game be exactly as it was in the beta when it comes out? So this is from the official Battlefield team at Battlefield Studios. It's not like a director or anything like that. It's just like from the whole, like, you know, them kind of talking about what they're changing. So some pretty big things about movement and some other things going on in here, but let's start with their perspective here. They say, thank you to everyone who joined the beta. A ton of people played the beta, not only on the EA launcher, but also on Steam and console as well. People jumped in and really, like, there was very huge numbers for the beta overall. Your passion and feedback have been invaluable, with tens of thousands connecting on Discord to play together. The people actually showed up on Discord to join voice calls and stuff. Over 600,000 hours streamed and over 30 million hours watched. Your enthusiasm and participation is what made it great. So they start with what they learned from the experience overall. So initial learnings and in-game changes. As we approach the launch of Battlefield 6 on October 10th, we'd like to take a moment to look back at the recent open beta to share our key learnings and in-game changes we're making based on your feedback and also metrics and data they collected from people playing. First, they touch on weapons. We're making targeted adjustments to deliver a more consistent and rewarding gunplay experience across the game. This includes a general pass on recoil and tap fire characteristics across all weapons, further emphasizing their unique feel and improving range differentiation. I think one of the biggest things in point of contention for people in the beta was the slug rounds for the shotgun shells and how effective they were at, you know, medium range in general, being able to headshot people from a distance and snipe with it. Now, that's a different discussion from the power of the shotguns up close, and I think in general, historically, it is hard to get shotguns right in shooters. Oftentimes, the shotguns are either way too powerful or way too weak, and I think, you know, up close, if you land most of your pellets on a target, especially in a game with a TTK that's as short as it is in BF6, you really do need the shotgun to be a powerhouse when you're very up close against the target. The question is just, you know, should it be effective at medium range, you know, 30 to 60 meters, as it was in the BF6 beta? So they're looking at recoil, they're looking at gun ranges, that are working to make sure the guns feel different enough. And I think that's very important. Weapon balance is a big thing for BF6, especially with BF6 allowing you to use pretty much any weapon you want on any class that you want. Then, you know, if the weapons aren't well balanced, then you get that kind of meta homogeny where everyone runs the same weapon on every class. So having the weapons feel like they fill a niche, like they have a purpose and they have different range and effective purposes, then I think that's going to go a long way, and it sounds like they're of that same persuasion as well. They go on to say, we've also made changes to encourage more controlled tap firing and burst firing. So being able to just kind of not spray and pray, but actually have more controlled, you know, aspects over how you shoot your weapon, rewarding precision and weapon mastery. So making sure that not only are you just spraying at the enemy, but maybe you're aiming at their head, or you're aiming at a weak point, or you're aiming at the right corner, and you're controlling your fire with a little bit more expert precision. Additionally, the M87A1 shotgun now requires more pellets to secure a kill. So all they did here, based on what they're describing, is that they're making it so the damage per pellet on the M87A, for example, that shotgun specifically, is now the damage per pellet has gone down. It likely means that you now need to hit more of the percentage of the pellets. Realistically, before, which we'll show some clips here in a second on how the shotgun actually works, you aim in general direction and you one-shot someone, aim at someone else, one shot, aim at someone else, one shot. As long as you're within 10 to 15 meters of them, it's going to be a one shot. And I think that was a little bit too far for the shotgun. Again, I want to caution them, like, you know, you don't want to make shotguns useless. They should be, you know, one of the most terrifying weapons you can face if you round a corner and someone's right in your face. But it also should be a little bit more on the aiming side, making sure that not only do the majority of the pellets land on the target, but also the majority of the pellets should land on a crucial area, like the center of mass where there's organs, or the head, something like that, right? If I hit 50% of my pellets and, you know, most of those land on the arm, it shouldn't still be a one shot. It should require some aim, and it sounds like they're in that as well. We are investigating the time to kill and time to death experiences, and we will share an update if definitive changes are made in these areas. Which personally for me, I actually had no problem with the time to kill. I think, generally, especially if you're going to have maps as small as we had in Battlefield 6 beta, obviously that's not all of the maps. There's going to be more maps coming that they didn't have in the beta in general, but the TTK didn't really bother me all that much. It was more of just the movement and the restriction on how many vehicles we could use that stood out the most to me as gripes for the game in general, but let me know where your gripes were. Next is probably the most hotly debated topic, aside from like larger maps and vehicles in Battlefield 6 in general, is the movement. And this one is a bit of a minefield, so we're gonna have to tiptoe through this properly, because I think obviously nobody wants a game where you move at the speed of smell like your legs are wrapped in molasses, right? They don't want a game where you crawl along like you just can't find any mobility at all, but they also don't want, like a Supervive or a Red Hot or something where you're like teleporting and warping and stuff like that. So something in the between makes a lot of sense. And I think what a lot of people had around feedback on the Battlefield 6 beta is that it felt more like an Apex Legends or a Call of Duty, which is historically not what Battlefield has been, considering it's more about using vehicles, reinforcing when possible, using the right setup and the right loadout and the right class to overcome your challenges, rather than being able to jump, dip, dive, duck, and dodge all over the place and do what you need to do. But this is going to be an interesting topic, because I know that some people really liked the movement in Battlefield 6. There's definitely a large audience for people that like Call of Duty and Apex Legends style games, even with a controller. And there's also a lot of people that just want that to be the norm, especially the people that like Call of Duty but are displeased with the last Black Ops and want a new game to play. So kind of a sticky situation to dive into. So what do the devs say? They say movement mechanics have been adjusted to create a more balanced and traditional Battlefield experience. Momentum, especially horizontal speed, carried from a slide into a jump has been reduced. There is now a greater penalty for consecutive jumps, so if you're spamming jumping or bunny hopping, which lowers jump height when jumps are spammed. Now, when we're talking about Battlefield 6 movement, this is kind of the thing that went viral around the game as well. And a lot of what you're seeing here is sliding, some minor dolphin diving, and also being able to carry momentum when you slide into a jump and going side to side. So at the peak, most players in Battlefield 6 are not going to be able to achieve what this player has achieved, and the sheer amount of speed and momentum you can see. You can see the shotgun here. This is what like the peak level of BF6 was capable of. You can see jump dive, shotgun shot, jump dive, shotgun shot, jump dive, shotgun shot. And you can see the shotgun one-shotting, and the motion, horizontal, forward, the momentum that carries, the aerial speed, how much velocity you can get when moving. All of this is very clear from clips like these. And so this kind of sparked a debate, and there's actually a large amount of players on both sides of it. Some people like this, like they want Battlefield like this. It's like, hey, I get to play Apex Legends or Call of Duty, but instead I have vehicles and stuff that I get to try out as well, which is pretty cool. And there's definitely people that are like more old school Battlefield veterans. They're like, this is way out of line. This is not Battlefield. You should not be able to move like this. So the changes they're making is they're greatly reducing the bunny hopping, which means if you repeat jump over and over, you will start to slow yourself more and more. Your jump height will go down. This is very common in games where they want you to focus on precision movement rather than spamming, and so they put a penalty in that prevents you from being able to spam and jump around like this in general. And they're also reducing your horizontal movement speed, which has a dual effect. First, it's going to mean that your movement is going to be a lot more deliberate, and second, it means that it's going to be easier for other people to aim at you, right? When your horizontal movement gets weaker, it means that the people that have to correct their aim when looking at you, the requirement of that aim goes lower, which means it's going to be easier for people to shoot you and hit you, especially if they're at a beginner or intermediate level of FPS. But that goes on. They say not only are they reducing your repeat jumps with a penalty, they're reducing your horizontal momentum when you're moving through the air, but also on top of that, firing while jumping or sliding will result in increased inaccuracy. These changes are designed to make sliding and jumping more situational, so they are no longer ideal options for engaging in gunfights and will contribute to a gameplay pace that rewards skillful movement without becoming too fast or unpredictable. And I think, obviously, if you round the corner and there's a tank facing you, you may want to slide jump to get around the corner to get out of the line of sight. If you're looking up and you see that glint of someone's, scope from the mountaintop, especially on this map specifically, then you want to be able to jump slide out of the way. And having the ability to move quickly, I think, is really good. I think there's a fair argument, especially for people that are Battlefield purists, not wanting to play all FPSs in general, can make an argument that if you are jump sliding, flipping, flopping, and ducking and diving all over the place, you should have a reduced level of inaccuracy, so you can't jump slide, bunny hop, and then hit someone in the air as you're flying through it. It's possible in most shooters, but they're making that change here. So this is a big one, so let me know what you think about this change down below. Next, they're doing a change to the parachute physics. This is a minor change for people that use parachutes in general, but there's also two major problems in the beta that, again, most players probably can't do themselves, but watching it is probably frustrating, and dealing with it when someone can do it is frustrating. There were a lot of ways to use the parachute to get yourself up onto buildings where you shouldn't be able to, even on maps that don't have aerial vehicles, right? It's very Battlefield to get into a helicopter and get up on a building you're not supposed to be on, and then you shoot down on people when they don't know that you're there. That's Battlefield. That's always going to be the case. But it was the case as well on some maps that didn't even have helicopters and jets, that you could get up onto buildings you weren't supposed to get on by using the parachute and some various other techniques, which meant that you could stay above the level and shoot at people, and no one ever knew where you were shooting them from because they couldn't tell where you were on the map. So they're making some parachute physics. So actually, that's the first problem. The second problem was that people were using parachutes to gain minor momentum while flying through a gunfight, right? So they pull out the parachute and cancel it and do some weird stuff like that. So they are retuning the physics on the parachute with reduced initial acceleration. This targets more of the people using parachute mid-gunfight to get some distance, when opening the parachute for more controlled aerial movement. Next, for maps, we observed some players finding a way to reach rooftops and venture out of bounds, so what we just talked about. This gameplay is not intended for these maps, and the accompanying ladder for the assault class is also not designed to access these areas. We didn't have the deployable ladder where you could use to siege. It's like the old school medieval times ladder where they try to climb up a castle. The assault class will have a deployable item that they can use to bridge a gap, climb up into second-story windows or third-story windows, things like that. But they say that that's not what it's meant for. It's not meant to climb on top of things that you're not supposed to get onto. So they're actively working on adjusting the maps to prevent unintended access and ensure gameplay stays within intended boundaries. There is a long laundry list of tricks that developers can use to make sure you don't get where you're supposed to, where you're not supposed to, by either adding, physics volumes, blocking volumes. The age-old one that everyone hates is invisible walls. They could obviously just put collision there. You could also put, a bouncing volume that gives your character an impulse of physics that launches you off the area you're not supposed to stand on, yada yada. And I'm sure they're going to do a mix of these techniques and other ones as well to try and get you off of the areas you're not supposed to be on. And it will probably be an ongoing thing. They probably won't be able to squash all the different ways that you can get out of bounds or on top of a building you're not supposed to be on for launch, but it sounds like they are making it, they're trying to address it for release. They also heard the strong feedback from players excited by the larger scale maps that Battlefield has to offer. This was a big piece of feedback, and I'm definitely in that camp where there was only one large map in the beta, and on that large map, there can only be one aircraft of each type up in the air, which is not the 1942s and the Battlefield 1s that we all look back on fondly, where, you get on an aircraft carrier or an airfield and you launch 4 jets and you're flying around and there's all kinds of things going on, and helicopters, or Vietnam, and you fly in on a couple helicopters deep and you're trying to siege a point like that. Having only one aircraft in the air on a map that's it says it's large, but it's probably more medium in general. A lot of people are saying, where are the big maps? Where are the large areas? Where are the multiple vehicles? Where can we get the Battlefield experience? And they said that there are more large maps coming, but they wanted to address this directly. While the open beta featured smaller, more fast-paced maps, larger scale maps are already part of our launch package. I believe there's 2 more large maps already ready to go for the launch in general, delivering action-packed gameplay and memorable, unique moments for every player. They go on to say that as part of the upcoming Battlefield Labs testing, we'll be testing 2 new multiplayer maps, one set in Merak Valley, the other a remake of the fan favorite from Battlefield 3, Operation Firestorm. These two maps include the full complement of vehicles like Liberation Peak, along with a more vast combat space. So if they're bigger than Liberation Peak, I think that's awesome. I actually enjoyed Liberation Peak, both from the vehicle side and also when they had the smaller, limited, like King of the Hill style modes with a limited portion of Liberation Peak was great. But it sounds like those two maps, Merak Valley and Operation Firestorm, are going to be a bit bigger than Liberation Peak, and hopefully that means that they'll lift the restriction of only having one type of aircraft up in the air at a time. So maybe we could do 2 jets instead of 1, or 2 helicopters instead of 1. Maybe if we're feeling frisky-bisky, risky-disky, and we're going to do 3 jets at once, that could be pretty cool. Next, as it pertains to modes, when it comes to Rush, the conversation we observed wasn't just about player count, but also about how maps play and the tactical experience they offer. Part of this, and I think there's definitely going to be a multiple tiered approach to how they solve this problem. I think some of the maps that were smaller were plagued by bad respawns. Oftentimes you would spawn in the middle of the street surrounded by enemies with a tank barrel jammed down your throat. As you would spawn, you would instantly die, and then you would respawn and instantly die. And I think that that was leading to bad experience. Even though the map by itself may have been fine, there was some respawn logic, and obviously the prevalence of the shotgun being very powerful in the beta. Those two things together can make a great map feel really bad because they're ruining the experience on their own. But there's, a lot of the feedback on the Rush mode specifically was kind of in that vein. Rush is a mode with deep roots, originally known as Gold Rush in Bad Company, where matches typically range from 12v12 to 16v16. Many of you remember this as the golden era of Rush, and it continues to inspire our approach today. They continue on to say, we've experimented with larger player counts over the years, such as 64 and even 128 player versions. While these matches create intense, fast-paced moments, they also lead to issues. Overwhelming defenses, stalled front lines, and too many games ending in the first sector. So yeah, if you get a match made with 128 or 64 players, and it's very obvious from the jump that the matchmaker did not do a good job this time around, like you're getting blasted out of the water, they're at 800 tickets and you're already at 140, even though the match just started. Sometimes that leads to a very boring match because you're just playing out the death march, the match is already over when it began. Sometimes you get to the point where the front line is locked, no one can move it because it's perfectly balanced, or the vehicles aren't enough to push it over, and so you get some of these boring stalemates where you can't get through the larger maps, and all of that is true as well. Rush is especially sensitive to high player counts due to its tactical and strategic requirements. When a player tries to arm the MCOM while more than 20 opponents are defending, the intended gameplay becomes less tangible, which is super true, right? The map and the mode go hand in hand with the number of players, and I think that, that's something that they need to keep tweaking to make it feel right. If you're doing King of the Hill or you're doing Rush or all that stuff, you have too many players, it can ruin it. But also, if you're playing all-out warfare and you're doing the big maps and there's only 5 people, that can also ruin the experience. So the number of players, how often they respawn or restock or reinforce, how many vehicles they get if it's a map that has vehicles, all of that plays a big role in that game mode and map style feeling just right. Based on feedback throughout recent titles, we're lowering the default player count for Rush to improve the flow of combat and restore the tactical, methodical experience that defines the mode. So now Rush will have less players on it, which is, kind of interesting. I'd have to play it. In my head, it sounds right, but I also feel like if there's not enough players to face against in a Rush mode, maybe it feels bad. It probably was a little bit too much for Rush in general, but let me know where your head is at on that one. And to ease the people that don't like the fact that Rush is lowering the player count, they say for those who enjoy large-scale Rush, Portal will allow you to experiment with different player counts at launch. They have the custom queue modes, they have Portal, you can kind of create your own experience. I think while it is true that Portal will solve some of this problem for some people, there's going to be a question of, since we don't have a server browser in Battlefield 6, where normally we have server browsers that we can lean on, there's going to be a question of queue times, matchmaking, stuff like that, right? Obviously, maybe a month after Battlefield 6 launches, how many people are going to be queuing for the global modes versus a custom mode versus Portal, and are we going to be able to fill matches and stuff like that? So the more you segment things on the lower popular modes and queue options, does it get to the point where you can't even get matches started, or if you do, they're incomplete and not filled up? So there's other problems that come along with this, but we'll have to play it by ear and see how that goes. In contrast, Breakthrough is designed to accommodate higher player counts of up to 64, so 32 versus 32, and that's where the mode really shines. Using win-loss data from the open beta, we're continuing to make map-by-map balance adjustments towards our goal of 50-50 win ratio for both attackers and defenders. There's definitely, obviously with a beta, you have people all over the place, people are learning, and they probably got better statistics and metrics from the second weekend as people adjusted to how firing works in Battlefield 6, how movement works in Battlefield 6. It sounds like that we're going to have to relearn the new movement when the game comes out in October, and we'll probably have to adjust from that as well, but we'll see kind of how that goes in general. But they like where Breakthrough is at, and they want to kind of keep it to how it felt in the open beta. Next, the approach to player counts. There was some confusion around the number of players in different games, so we wanted to take a moment to clarify our current direction for how these get determined. So their philosophy on how they handle map size and player counts and team sizes for the maps that they create. Rather than locking maps and modes to a fixed player count, our philosophy is to adapt to best fit the intended experience. This may vary by map or evolve over time with player feedback, which obviously is exactly what they're doing right now with the posts they're posting. They're adapting to player feedback on how the game felt and what players want. For example, at launch, some Breakthrough layouts will support 48 players instead of 64, while others have 64. It's the one of many factors we adjust to create the right balance and feel for each scenario. In Breakthrough, higher player counts work well on open dynamic maps, while smaller player groups offer a more focused experience on denser maps. That should come as no surprise to anybody. Portal gives players the flexibility to try different settings and find what works best for their group and playstyle, and hopefully they're going to be paying attention to the custom queues, the custom modes, and most specifically Portal to see if there are some new trends that kind of go against the base modes, right? If they find out that everyone's, doing Portal with certain settings that are different than the default queue, maybe they'll adapt the default queue to be those settings, realizing that the players just want it to be that way by default. Finding the right balance is an ongoing process as everyone gets familiar with map sizes, lanes, and combat spaces. This is a huge thing for new shooters, and I'm sure if you're a big shooter fan, you know this deep in your bones, in your loins. But in general, like, one of the things about new shooters is you don't have map knowledge, and you don't have the kind of awareness that you would have after playing for a little while, right? The peak spots, the corners, where you can shoot, where people spawn, where the enemies come from, where the vehicles spawn, all that stuff is tribal knowledge that you'll learn from playing the game. And when you day one, your first 30 minutes of playing, you're not going to have that knowledge, and it gets harder to abuse. But after you've been playing for a week, you kind of know where the sight lines are, where you can peek from, where the players will come from, and that allows you to pre-fire or set up your shots or line up your shots and actually be able to play more effectively, which is a big part of that process. For now, we found that 8v8 provides a solid starting point for small-scale, fast-paced modes like Team Deathmatch, Squad Deathmatch, Domination, and King of the Hill. And to be honest, actually, I really liked the Domination and King of the Hill on some of the smaller areas. It felt very tense and very tight, but because it was 8v8, you actually had this downtime. Like, you would have someone to pop up every now and then you would have this really intense fight, and then you'd have a little bit of downtime, like 15 seconds, and then another person would pop up. And I actually really enjoyed, though I tend to like the bigger maps in Battlefield, I did like the smaller 8v8 and agree that it was a good feel. Next, they want to talk about playlist options. A limited variety of playlist options were created for the open beta to both showcase and test the flexibility of the matchmaking system. For more details on our playlist adjustments, see their other posts for this as well. Playing with both open and closed weapons will continue to be options in Battlefield 6, and we are looking for ways to keep them easily accessible. However, they go on to say, we recognize that some players experienced difficulty finding games to complete the challenge of capturing sectors in Breakthrough or Rush. It wasn't ideal, and we're actively using your feedback and in-game data to review and improve the matchmaking system with the goal of providing a smoother experience in the future. So I think there's two things they really need to improve specifically on this issue. One, they need to actually make the main menu a lot easier to navigate. I think that is a huge miss in a game, especially a game that's supposed to be drop in and play like Battlefield 6. If you land on the main page of Battlefield 6 and none of the buttons in view on the main menu put you in game, that is a huge problem. In fact, the baseline UI for the main menu on Battlefield 6, you had to scroll down like 3 times to get to the queues, and even then, many of the queues were nested in other menus, which is complete trash, and they have to rework the flow and the user experience for the main menu, and it sounds like they're kind of aware of that, and they also want to look at how the default queues are set up, what the parameters are for those queues, and trying to make those feel good. So it's comforting to know that they are aware of these issues and they're going to be addressing these for launch. So we'll just have to wait and see if those results are actually what we're looking for. And they say with the insights gathered during the open beta play sessions, we'll be introducing in-game adjustments in upcoming Battlefield Labs events. So stay tuned for progress updates and future opportunities to get involved. So we know that they're changing the horizontal momentum. We know they're adding a penalty for spamming and bunny hopping. We know that they're making some adjustments to the shotgun and how it functions, and they're playing around with the size of the rush mode. But there's more that they'd like to do that they're experimenting with internally, and they're looking at more feedback in general. That's kind of just an update of what they're looking at right now. So that's where we're at with the Battlefield team, and as we speed towards a release in about 6 weeks or so here, as they go towards the full release of Battlefield 6. Now, this is going to be an interesting topic, because I know that there are some people that absolutely loved Battlefield 6. It was perfect as it is, don't change it, but they are making changes. Movement changes, weapon changes, mode size changes. So I know there's going to be some people that are like, yes, we win, and there's going to be some people that say, don't change it, what are you doing? You're ruining the game. So let me know what side of this you're on down below in the comments, and what you think about the direction they're moving in for Battlefield 6. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.